business.
Okay, well, let me give you that chance to talk about property tax.
Okay, good.
I've asked lots of candidates that,
Yeah.
and without exception, they agree it's discriminatory, it's unfair, blah, blah, blah. But just like Social Security, we've known for decades, it needs to be fixed. Nobody's fixed it. I mean,
Right.
even though Dewhurst and others have said we've had all these property tax cuts, you don't see it when it comes in the mail.
Does anyone feel like they've had a tax cut? The answer is no.
So what mechanism, how you gonna do it, when you gonna change it, how can that happen?
Again, there are three main reasons, Dennis, that I'm running: secure the border, education, and property taxes. When I ran in 2006, I ran on this platform because back in '97, I talked about this on the radio for a decade, and we took bus trips up to testify on these bills long before I was in office. And we formed citizens to lower our unfair taxes because it was very clear to me once you put a 10% cap in, it would become the floor, in essence, automatic. And while it wasn't always 10%, it became 8 and 9%. And we saw homes double between the late 1990s and 2007 before the downturn. And there's a simple math rule. It's called the rule of 72. Anything you divide by 72 doubles over that time. So if your property value goes up 8% a year on average, in 9 years it doubles. So let's just take a typical home, and people watching, not everyone has a $200,000 house. Some people have more, some people have less, but it's easy math. If you have a $200,000 home in Texas, your taxes are approximately $6,000 a year. Could be a little higher, a little lower, depending where you live, but about $3 a hundred. If you're 40 years old and live in that $200,000 home, before you're 50, that home, if it goes up 8% a year, will be now valued at $400,000 with a tax bill of $12,000. And before you turn 60, that home will be valued at $800,000 with a tax bill of $24,000. No one can afford that. You want the value of your property to go up, but you don't want to be taxed on it. That would be like being taxed on the stock as it goes up, even if you never sold it. And so what happens is we have taxation through evaluation without representation. So if the 7 of us live on a street, and Dennis, you get a job somewhere else and sell your house for a big profit, our taxes go up based on your gain. Well, that's not right. And so I've been fighting for this from day one. I've filed bill after bill after bill and never had support by the Lieutenant Governor in a meaningful way to move these bills. Again, the Lieutenant Governor is all powerful. You get a finance chair that's going to move these bills because you understand this is a crisis for families. And the three answers of doing it real quick, and sorry, pals, but this is a complex issue. My direct answer has always been lower the appraisal cap from 10 to 3 to 5%, which puts you in line with inflation population. But there's opposition to that. And
that's not nearly enough.
But it needs to be. But I also live in the real world. We're not going to get it down to 0. We're not going to get it down to 1. But we can get it down to 3 to 5. I've never been able to get a bill out, as I said, but one year I got an amendment on a Glenn Hager bill. And I actually lost 20 to 8. 20 to 8, that they didn't want to reduce the appraisal cap from 10 to 5. And so, and the reason I say 3 to 5, generally inflation population is going to run somewhere 3 to 4%. And so you can keep up with that. But there's opposition to that. So then I came back and I said, okay, let's just lower the amount of money that your local counties and cities and school budgets can go up. So we have a rollback now, but it's very hard. Then the third way to approach it is a seesaw method. As your values go up, your tax rate goes down to no more than population inflation. And some people may say maybe just inflation. At the end of the day, we must get your property taxes down where they don't increase more than the rate of inflation. And again, I say the population because we're a fast-growing state. And I don't care, as Lieutenant Governor, I don't care which method we take, as long as we all get to the same place, that people can buy a home, know the taxes are not going to go up dramatically in a year, not have to fight with the appraisal districts and argue over the values, and that they can live in their home when they pay it off. I also want to freeze all taxes for those 65, not just school taxes. Some do it, but rarely in the state. I want to freeze all taxes. Because if the local governments need more money, then they need to come to you as people and say, look, for whatever reason, we need more money, and here's why, and then you vote on it. You make that decision. Right now, they get automatic 7, 8, 9% increases in their budget. Yeah. And that's just, so I'm going to tell you, I'm going to get this done. Because
that addresses the issue of being unaffordable, but it doesn't touch the issue of being unfair or discriminatory.
Right. In terms of?
Well, Just a quick example.
Yeah.
When I got to be my mid-50s, I said, I can't maintain this house in 20 years when I was 40 years old.
Right.
And I can't climb those stairs.
Right.
So simply by building a new house, the exact same
Right.
floor plan on
Right.
a single level, my price is doubled.
Right.
Just because it was a new neighborhood, not more valuable, the prices were the same, evaluated more often, and because it was a single floor, which old and crippled people want.
Right. Well,
So it needs a consumption tax or a big element.
Well,
in consumption.
what I've always wanted to do is move to a, particularly in education finance, where most of your property tax are education. We have to move to a sales tax model. There are only three ways to tax people: income tax, which we don't want; sales tax, or property tax. That's basically, you can have some other fees and that, but it's sales tax, income tax, and property tax. I'm a consumption tax guy. I also, again, I'm always going to be candid with the voters. There are so many more things we can do to make Texas better economically for every citizen and businesses. But there are also some limits to what we can do, because you have to work with not just Democrats and Republicans to pass bills, but you have rural factors, urban factors, and suburban factors. But when I first started talking about this, people said, it's a Harris County problem, that's a Dan Patrick radio issue. Now the property taxes are a statewide issue. It kind of went away for a few years when we were at 0% growth and no one's taxes went up, but it's back now. And so in the inner cities, people can't afford it, as people where their land is worth more than their house. So Democrats now, it's an issue for them. So we will get it done, but you have to have a lieutenant governor that says this is a priority and we're going to lower it. And if you bring the cap down to a simple 3% or bring the rate to no more than 3%, you don't have all these issues you're talking about. So that's how we get there.
Okay. When the first hearing came up on Cisco, Dennis and I were both present at
Yeah.
that hearing, and I came up and spoke to you
Yes, you did.
afterwards.
You did.
Um,
It was a pretty amazing hearing.
It was an amazing hearing. It was a long road to get there.
Yes.
As per many releases last year, we were told that Seascope is dead.
Right.
Seascope is not dead. Seascope is
Correct.
still there. What are we gonna do?
First of all, this is a grassroots victory. I can tell you how I'll be different as a lieutenant governor. As lieutenant governor, I will not take credit for anything that gets done, but I will take the blame for things that don't get done. The buck stops with me. On Cisco, it was some of people that you all know brought information to me last fall. The legislature really didn't know a lot about it. It really just kind of bubbled up on that one lesson about the Boston Tea Party being terrorists, kind of bubbled up. And so I had a lady, very nice, you all know Colleen, she's terrific, and Colleen brought me a stack of paper at an event in September or so, off Clay Road, and I said, Colleen, if you can read, I can't read that much. There's so many hours a day. And so she gave me a really good summary sheet. And what I saw in that, and some other people, was things that concerned me, to where I promised to hold a hearing. Had I not been education chair, I don't think there would have been a hearing. And quite frankly, when I scheduled that hearing, a lot of my fellow senators thought, well, what is Patrick doing? He's new education chair, and we're going to go off on this tangent about taking on the curriculum of Cisco. And what I proved in that hearing, and you all know you were there, was I didn't really attack it on the core issue of what was in the lesson plans, because there'd be arguments over that. I attacked it on, was it legally set up, which it wasn't. Were the dollars properly accounted for? We have a full-time audit that I asked for. The lieutenant governor didn't ask for it. I asked for it, and worked with the attorney general on that, Greg Abbott. And that hearing was an amazing hearing and led to a series of things. So Pat, what it led to was they agreed to shut down the nonprofit. 2, we now have an audit going. 3, in Senate Bill, I guess it was 1406, to review all the lesson plans. But then they came to us and said, look, we want to be out of the lesson plan business. We just want to be out of the lesson plan business. And so we said, terrific. And that killed the program. And that's when actually I thought it was a victory, because we didn't have the votes to kill it. But I thought, what a great victory for the people. Well, everything was running fine until a lawyer came along from TEA and said, no, you know what? Because remember, one of the things, what was the complaint? We want to see everything online. Well, I made that happen. We made them put everything online. And now the catch-22 was, the lawyer comes along and says, well, it's online, it's public domain. So I believe the lawyer's wrong. That's a legal fight, which will take time. But that's why Cisco came back. We did a lot of work, and again, most of the research that we relied on came from the people. And so that's where we were. We thought it would, once someone says we're no longer going to be in business, it's over. And then a lawyer comes along and says, well, everybody can still use it. And now there may be others circumventing it on their own. Look, you have to understand something else. We're a state with 5 million students in traditional public schools, 150,000 in charters, 250,000 in private schools, 300,000 homeschools, 5.7 million. Over almost 1,200 school districts and superintendents, 300,000 teachers. You know, we can do a lot of things, but it doesn't mean everyone follows the rules. So the most important election, I always tell people, is your local school board. Your local school boards have to keep your superintendents accountable. And if there's some rogue districts that go out there, I mean, we passed the Merry Christmas bill, and we had some superintendents say, you know, no, we're not going to do Christmas in our schools. I mean, you know, it's a big state, and some people, you know, don't follow the rules. And so we're always have to, Common Core, we passed a bill, Dan Huberty and I passed a bill to keep Common Core out of Texas, but there are some schools trying to circumvent it. It's, you know, we pass a law, you can't drive more than X miles an hour. People do. I mean, it just happens. So I going back to the special session, I filed a bill that would have eliminated C-scope forever. The bill simply said, because I went to lawyers and said, okay, I need to lawyer the lawyer. He said, you just need to file a bill, Dan, that says no lesson plan written before 2013 can be used. I filed that bill. Did the lieutenant governor ever support that bill?
Was that 1406?
No, 1406 was the review. I can't remember the number on this. This was a bill I filed in a special session. Perry didn't put it on the call, and Dewhurst didn't ask for it to be on the call. But if I'd been lieutenant governor, I'd have been on the rooftop fighting for that, because that would have ended it. So the lieutenant governor, who was never involved in C-scope, never involved during session, regardless of what the rhetoric is today. I mean, that's just the facts. Never involved in it. I mean, we probably had 2 conversations over it. He was not engaged in it. Now he's engaged in it. He had the chance to go to the governor and say, we need to bring this bill to the floor and end C-scope forever. There was not a peep. So that's the story.
So where do we go from here?
Where we go from here is one of the first bills I will ask a senator to file in 2015 is no lesson plans written before August of 2, and we may want to update it, but no lesson plans, to my knowledge, supposedly are being written now. But if we have to move that date up, no lesson plans written before this date can be used, period. Greg Abbott and I, not the lieutenant governor, Greg Abbott and I worked on this tirelessly. Greg Abbott hasn't asked for any credit on this, nor his staff. But that's who I worked with during session.
And how long before the audit?
We don't know. The auditor asked me, Dan, when we applied for it, you know, when I came to your meeting that time, Tony and Tom Fabry did a terrific job. I set up a meeting with him, with the auditor. He went in and presented. Tom, for those watching, is a good conservative activist. In fact, I was with him last night up in Frisco. And so he went in. They were very interested. I told the state auditor, I don't want a rush job. We've got a whole school year. We're in the middle of it. I want to complete. I believe that there were millions of dollars spent without bids and contracts. I'm not accusing anyone of criminal activity. I'm just saying I believe, you know, and we'll find out. But that whole program needs to go away. Any teacher, like my wife was a longtime school teacher, any teacher can take any information from anywhere to create a lesson plan. Any teacher can do that. You could be out of a magazine, something they saw on television, so it could, they on a trip they were on, you can create a lesson plan out of anything. And when we had all this hubbub from these districts, what are we going to do about lesson plans? Teachers should write their own lesson plans.
Well, they have for years.
Yes, and so what do we do is, there are going to be a lot of things we do when we hit the ground running in January. Campus carry is going to be up on the docket, passed. We're going to get Sanctuary City up on the docket and ended. In-state tuition up on the docket and ended. And C-scope up on the docket and ended.
Well, once that audit is released and you find out
Right.
the money trail and what the abuse was and what was not legal, is the state going to prosecute and relieve those people from their jobs?
I can't, Pat, that's beyond my purview. That's up to the Attorney General. I'm not a judge and jury.
But you would be urging him to do that?
The evidence, the Attorney General will make, whoever the Attorney General is, and it may come forth before Greg Abbott leaves and becomes governor. That's a decision. I'm not going to speak for the law enforcement arm of our state. Let's just say I wouldn't have asked for an audit if I didn't want exposure to what happened to taxpayer money, but it's up to the Attorney General then to take the next course of action. But Greg Abbott was a strong ally in this, and he's made it very clear, we're gonna put a stake through the heart of C-scope. So I'm proud of what we did. We got a lot done, and at the end of the day, a lawyer spoke up and said, hey, this is allowed out there. And I'm disappointed that any superintendent or any principal would go against the will of the teachers, who for the most part didn't want it, and go against the will of the parents who don't want it.
To further, on C-scope, was your bill, and I wasn't there.
Right.
So I'm kind of coming in on the tail end of this
Right.
thing here. Was 1406 your bill?
Was
SB 1406?
I'd have to go back and look at the number to make sure it's right. After 4,000 votes, I have to actually go back. But
Yeah.
the bill that I authored,
It was the one to kill C-scope back
it was to put everything under
the
review.
first of the year. Yeah.
And again, we have to put everything back in perspective. In the beginning of the year, at the beginning of the year, everyone was happy that we had a hearing. Okay? Then everyone was happy that we got them to close down the nonprofit that shouldn't have been formed. Then everyone was happy that they were going to put all the lesson plans online. So we kept doing all these things, and then we said, okay, we want C-scope, all these lesson plans to be reviewed. When we found out there were lesson plans teaching middle schoolers to make communist flags for countries, when we found out, a variety of lesson plans, I don't have to go through all in the time we have here, we wanted them to be reviewed, and that review began. But when the regional service centers who ran C-scope said we're going to end the program, then quite frankly, there really wasn't need at that point, because the program was going away. You don't review something that's gone. And so it was, in essence, ended at that point. But we passed the bill, and now that it's back in some forms, they're doing that review. They're doing the review that we passed. And I had to, I was stunned when I heard the lieutenant governor say he came to Dan Patrick and said, Dan, pass this bill. We never had a discussion on that. It was a bill we created. I'm not being critical here, but there've just been so many, I'm going to be kind, less than candid statements made about this whole process from the lieutenant governor's office. And we're not looking, I give the credit to the people, but our education committee did a great job on it. The lieutenant governor was not involved. And no matter how much he wants to rewrite history.
So are they reviewing?
They're reviewing.
And they will continue to review?
And they will continue to review. I'd have to speak to the chairman of the, Barbara Cargill, who does a great job to see exactly where they are. But and I appreciate the lieutenant governor is now gotten into the discussion. But that to review what they have. But here's the bottom line: we just need to get rid of it once and for all. And we didn't have the votes to do it during session. There weren't the votes to get rid of it. But there were. Look, it was hard for me to get the votes to put it under review because some people thought. And again, for the people watching, I think you all know this, but there are 20 regional service centers. The state's divided into 20 regional areas that have education service centers that help school districts. I would argue we don't need 20. You might argue we don't need any. But in some of the rural areas where your school districts are very small, they rely on the regional service centers. And the regional service centers are the ones that put together C-scope. And so the regional service centers do have their defenders. And so they felt like Dan Patrick was on a witch hunt, or that the conservative activists were on a witch hunt. And we weren't. We were just trying to get to the bottom of what every day, the more we learn, as Solomon says in the Bible, knowledge is grief. And the more we learn, and the more it was concerning. So to my knowledge, it is still under review, and I don't know where they are.
What I was trying to get to, though, there was a situation where Representative Steve Toth was carrying the bill on the House side, and you came over from the Senate side. And from my understanding, was you didn't want him to go forward with that bill to shut down C-scope.
Well, I'm proud to have Steve Toth's endorsement, and Steve Toth is a great conservative House member, and there was miscommunication between a freshman House member and a senator who's been around a couple of years, and I take responsibility for that miscommunication as the senior member, but it was just miscommunication about process. It was nothing more. there was a concern that we had this agreement that they were gonna end C-scope. And that was the heart of it. And the concern was that they were trying to get their votes from their 20 members to kill it. And so they simply asked, didn't require, they simply asked, we'd like to get our votes together. If you put it under review, if you pass that bill, it's as if you don't trust us. Give us until we get our votes together Friday to pass, to end it, and then do whatever you want. And so that was, and I was concerned that the miscommunication between everyone would have caused them to say, no, we're gonna keep C-scope. Because my goal, the most important thing, was to get rid of the C-scope lessons. And so that's what it was about, but that was not Steve's fault. It was not my fault, it was just miscommunication, and Steve and I are, we understand it. Things can get pretty complicated sometimes. And some of the people who have reported on it have tried to make more of it than it was. It just misunderstand it. And those things happen lots of times. You got a bill over in the Senate, you got a bill over in the House, somebody thinks we're gonna do this, we're gonna do that. That's not the only instance, I can assure you, in a session of 4,000 votes where sometimes things get mixed up. But it's not Steve's fault. I take responsibility.
It is 7 o'clock, we okay?
Yeah, what time?
I'm fine.
Okay. Carrying it on a little further, so I'm confused. So if they're reviewing it,
Yes.
do we know what they found in the reviews? Is that not going to be public until they finish the review? And if so, what I understand is C-scope changed the name, and so consequently everything changed. I would assume that the students are still getting the same tainted lessons that they had before, maybe under a different name or a different.
No, I can't address it specifically because, again, I would be less than candid to say I've had a chance to talk to 1,100 superintendents and go to all the school districts. You have to, and the public, this is why it's why I love the Tea Party, it's why I love the conservative activists, why I founded the Tea Party caucus, so that people, so that you all don't just vet candidates and elect candidates, but you actually know what happens once they get there, so that you can follow the process and hold people accountable. And what the public needs to understand is that there are only 31 senators for 25 million people. Unless people tell us what's happening in their communities, very often we're not going to know about it. And so the good news is, so far in the school year, I haven't had any parent contact us from any school and say, you know what, Dan? They're still teaching that Tea Party, the Boston Tea Party people are terrorists. Now, is there a rogue school out there somewhere, or district, or teacher? I mean, I don't know. I don't know things until they're brought to us. But we are, the SBOE is looking at 1,600 lessons. It takes a while, and so I don't know where they are in that process, but to my knowledge and to my belief, most of the school districts got the message. Most of them got the message and just said, we don't need this hassle. We're going to find an alternative. And the other thing you have to know about C-scope is when I first had various people come to me, I went around the district, I went around the state last year and met over 200 superintendents, because I wanted, as education chair, to know what was important. One of the reasons we passed the sweeping legislation we did to reduce state test 15 to 5, to put more focus on career, to pass the first charter bill in a decade, is you listen to people, you hear what's important to them, you bring them together, you craft legislation, whether it's the public or whomever it might be. And so in the case of all the education reforms, it was TAMSA, the Parents Against Too Much Testing, that were educators, it was teachers, it was parents, it was everyone. And when I was out in West Texas, I asked, because this was after I got some of this information on C-scope, I said, let me ask you all about this C-scope. How many of you are out here? And I had superintendents that came up to me and said, look, Dan, I would never use the lesson plans. No, we don't require. We use the management system so our new teachers know where they're supposed to be at a given week. And I know there's controversy about that, but that's what some of the superintendents said. But and there were other superintendents who swore by it. So not every school was using the lesson plans, but most of the schools were all using the management tool. And so I think they got the message. And the people have done a good job. Parents have gone to school board meetings and say, we don't want Common Core, we don't want C-scope. And if a superintendent is smart, he would listen to the people who elect the school board that signed this contract.
Okay.
So the TSAs in our airports, you had probably the pleasure today of walking through a naked body
Yeah.
scanner and all sorts of
Yeah.
fun. Now they even expanded this to, now if you take the ferry in Galveston, you go through a similar procedure with your car and everything. What can we as a state of Texas do to get our Fourth Amendment rights back?
Well, I'm kind of proud of this bill too. For somehow, you're discovering here, Dan, you're kind of in the middle of everything, whether it's passing the sonogram bill or C-scope or the TSA bill, because that's the kind of senator I've been. If I see an issue I'm concerned about, I'm going to try and fix the problem. And so on the TSA bill, and again, I don't take credit for this. I give this credit to David Simpson, who's I think he's from Longview. Is that David Simpson from Longview? David Simpson was a freshman in the 2011 session, and a lot of senators, I shouldn't say a lot of senators, some senators, they're not interested in visiting with freshmen unless it's freshmen from their district, because a freshman's got to learn their way from the House, 150 House members, and at time. I've always believed, particularly with conservatives, that if they had a good idea, our door is always open. In fact, as Lieutenant Governor, one of the things that I'm going to do also, I don't want to get in the House business. They need to run their deal, we run our deal. However, if members can't get a good bill out of committee in the House for whatever reason, if it's a good bill that I believe our people want to have passed, I'm going to do my best to get it passed out of the Senate so they get a shot to get it over there. I don't care if they've been there 3 months. I put in God We Trust in the Texas Senate in the first month I was on the floor. I was a freshman. I looked up and said, "Where's In God We Trust?" The Capitol's been there for 100 years. You don't have to be a veteran to know what needs to be done. So David Simpson came to me and said, "Dan," I had Giovanni Capriglione brought me a bill this year, freshman in the first month. They know I'm the conservative leader. That's why I have more House members endorsing me. I don't even think any other candidate has one House member endorsing them. I don't know how many exactly I have, but we have a lot of the conservatives, like Steve and like Giovanni up in Tarrant County and Rick Miller down at Fort Benning, all around, because they know they can come to me. They see how I vote. They see how I lead. They know I stand tall for conservative principles and values. And so David brought me this bill, and I said, "David, gosh, I don't know. We're going to be arresting TSA officers. I don't know how this is going to work. I don't know what law enforcement is going to say. But let me tell you what. I don't like it. I don't like what's going on in our airports. If you can get this out of the House, I'll carry the bill for you." Well, he got it out of the House by dogging. It was amazing. And he got it out of the House, and it came over. And there's the famous story. I had 29 senators to pass that bill, which would have basically allowed our police to arrest a TSA officer if they behaved in a way that, I forget the exact language of the bill, but they shouldn't be, inappropriate. And David Dewhurst got nervous. At 11 o'clock in the morning, I said, "Lieutenant Governor," we call him Governor, I've got my votes, let's go. Well, let's just wait. He called the federal government and asked them to come down. He called them. He said somebody called them. Well, I don't know who else would have called them. So I was called to the back hall in the middle of the day. And I went back there, and there may have been 3, I remember 2, it was the government, we're here to help. And they basically said, "Senator, if you pass this bill," because Rick Perry was going to sign it. There's no way we were going to sign it. "If you pass this bill, we may shut down all the airports in Texas on Monday morning. And do you want to be the person responsible? Really, Senator? Do you realize how many people are going to be mad at you?" And I said, well, I didn't believe them. I'm not going to be bullied by the federal government or anyone else. And I said, well, that's going to be a decision you have to make. I'm going to go out and pass that bill. I didn't realize the Lieutenant Governor had changed his mind on his support. So I went out. I was delayed and delayed and delayed. And someone asked the federal government for a letter spelling all that out. And so I go up to the Lieutenant Governor and I say, "Governor, I want to bring the bill to the floor." And it was nighttime. And he said, "Well, you really want to pass it?" I said, "Yeah, I really want to pass it." So while I'm on the floor, someone was handing that letter out. And other senators got very nervous. And they started coming up to me, casually walking by me as I'm talking. "Dan, I'm not with you. Dan, I'm not with you. You've lost my vote." I lost my vote because the Lieutenant Governor sent Kirk Watson, Democrat, down to the floor to peel away votes. And so I pulled the bill down. Some people say, well, why'd you pull it down? You should just have it voted. Once you have a vote on a bill, if you lose, you can never bring it back. I mean, people say, hey, you lost, Franklin, let you bring it back. But if you pull it down to kind of, regather your troops, you got a shot. So I pulled it down, and look, there have been not many times, Lord's given me good grace and patience, but I was pretty upset that night. And by the way, I said, those are all the facts, by the way. There's no one going to dispute, the lieutenant governor may dispute the fact, but that's what happened. And there was such a firestorm, that when we went into the special session, I went to Dewhurst and I said, Governor, I'm filing the bill. We need to have it. So Perry put it on the call, and this time we passed it. Now, it died in the House, and people could speculate, well, maybe that was arranged. I can't speak to those, I wasn't in those meetings. Wouldn't suggest anyone would do such a thing. But let's just say the governor, lieutenant governor, not the governor, the lieutenant governor blinked. And, but let me tell you what good came out of that. There's always a silver lining, because you learn things even when you fail. Look, I've had my share of successes and failures. You learn, and if you don't learn when you fail, or you don't complete the task, you never learn. The TSA got very nervous about, we got a lot of attention on that bill, and other states were looking at that and calling our office, hey, give us the language, or Simpson's office, I'm sure. And I do think, and particularly with children, there was remember there were some, I remember that bill, there were just some really obscene things that were going on at that time. For the most part, a lot of that seemingly outrageous behavior, there's still exceptions, have gone away. I think they cleaned up their act, or attempted to clean up their act, because they knew the public wasn't going to stand for it. So I do think we did have that impact, but that's the story of the TSA bill.
Okay, fine.
So back to the property taxes, it seems like, everybody's trying to figure out how to get somebody else to pay for their welfare check, or their corporate taxes, or their property taxes, or toll roads, or something like that. You talked about taxes being too high, but every time I get in a discussion with anybody, elected official or otherwise,
Right.
It's like, okay, you're going to do a sales tax, you're going to do a VAT tax, you're going to, what kind of tax you're going to do, and, it gets into this quagmire. Then, some people say, well, it's just, the problem's not taxes, you can take taxes out of my pocket, it still hurts the same way, the spending's the issue. So give us your, what's realistic in the next 4 or 8 years for Texas to do this, to solve this problem.
Yeah, and by the way, to be very clear on the record, I'm not the one running for office who's suggesting a VAT tax. There is one of my opponents who is suggesting that in multiple debates. He wants a value-added tax. And that's a socialist European tax that drives the cost of everything up. So I'm shocked that somebody actually is running for lieutenant governor as a Republican saying, I want a value-added tax. When I came there in 2007, as I recall, my numbers may be off a little bit, I have a pretty good memory, but not exact, our 2-year budget was about $164 billion. This past year, it was close to $200 billion. Now, we did cut it because we had that downturn that 1 year. I voted against the budget in 2007, I voted against the budget this year, and I voted for the budget when we cut it by $15 billion. And I voted for the budget in 2009 session because I got a $172 million tax cut for small business on the franchise tax, which needs to go away. That wasn't the only reason, but I felt that was a budget that
Thanks for your no votes.
pardon? Well,
Thanks for your no votes.
well, someone asked me about the budget this last session, then I'll quickly answer your question. And I said, here's the way you can explain this budget this last session. And I may have said it when we had our forum at your group back in, was that September, August? Seems like yesterday.
I know, it's October, yeah.
But any budget that every Democrat votes for and praises is not a conservative budget. The lieutenant governor loves his budget. Jerry Patterson says he would have voted for the budget. I voted against it. Brian Birdwell, I believe, voted against it. Ken Paxton voted against it. Donna Campbell, and a number of House members. This idea that we just continue to increase the budget because we have to, or because we have additional revenues, is not acceptable to me. I will also be honest and tell you that in a state that's adding 1,500 people a day, we have growing pains. And so you have to address those issues, because the public doesn't want to, I don't want to pay more taxes, you don't want to pay more taxes, but people also they don't want to be sitting in traffic all the time, they want to be sure we have our water met, et cetera, et cetera. People complain about school taxes, but they want the best school for their kids in their community. And gosh, we keep passing these bond issues for big football stadiums. So, it's kind of a mixed message sometimes. In half of our budget roughly, I'm just gonna use, if I had a big pie chart here, the camera's looking at me, a pie chart, you could draw a line from 12 to 6 roughly, education K through 16, roughly half the budget, close to. About a third of the budget is healthcare now, growing, and about 10% is public safety. So 90% of the budget is those 3 items. So in order to reduce spending, you're going to have to, and the healthcare issues, some of that we can control, some of it we can't. We've done a better job. And that's where I give, David some credit for trying to manage that with the Jane Nelson, although Jane was the lead on it. But we're going to have to come to the grips with the fact that we cannot afford to give our schools a never-ending amount of money without accountability being tied to it. We're not seeing improved graduation results. Maybe some spots here and there. We have a crisis in education in Texas. 25% roughly, depending on how you want to look at the math, drop out across the state, 40 to 50% in our inner cities. We have no future as a state if half the next adult population, which is going to be Hispanic, if half of them don't have a 12th grade education. One of the reasons we passed the great education reform this time to put focus on career was we need to keep kids in school and make it relevant. Not every kid wants to get a 4-year degree or needs to get one. It's up to them, but we've been trying to force all these kids, and that's a whole other issue. The cost of college has gone up 5 times the rate of inflation since the 80s. Is ridiculous. Mm-hmm. And so the answer on how we reduce spending, I've asked this question year after year. How much does it cost to educate a child? We've never answered that question. What is the number? And for some children, if you have a disability, it's different. If you don't speak English, it's different. There are not every child is equal.
So what can
Yeah. So
Texans are hurting.
Yeah.
Taxes are an issue. All kinds of problems we have. But
the property taxes are an issue. Yeah.
So what can be done?
Well, again, I want to lower property taxes. That's the.
But are you going to lower spending with it too, or?
Well, if you lower the revenue government gets, spending automatically gets lower.
Okay.
All right. Secondly, by lowering, again, remember the 3 taxes. Income tax we don't want. Okay. Sales tax, I'm a consumption tax guy because everyone then shares and pays. Even people who are spending, making money under the table, buy something, they're paying a tax. But with property tax, which is the most unfair tax of all, because even if you lose your job, it still goes on. And when you get older and your income goes down, it still goes on. We have to reduce the property taxes so that local governments must come to the people, as I said before, and ask for a vote when they want more money above inflation and population. They must. And then it's really up to the people. And you know what? People, it's like these school districts, about 70% of the bond issues pass. Some people don't agree to these school bonds, or I think Katie voted down recently, building a football stadium. It needs to be local, and that's the way it should be. It's up to the local community what they want. Are they willing to spend more money for more fire and police? And they have to hold their local officials accountable. So that the answer is by lowering property taxes, which fund, the big funding mechanism for our governments, it will force the local officials to make their case before the people, which isn't made now. That's how you get there. And I've always believed, by the way, if you go to people and there's a real need and you can prove up the need and say this will improve your life, or we need this for your safety or security, whatever it might be, that the average taxpayer will do what they know is the right thing for their family or their business or their community. But they're sick and tired of just automatically more money going to things beyond their control or without their knowledge.
I appreciate it. That pretty well wraps up. I don't know, there may be an 800-pound gorilla in the room, but I've been thinking about it for a while.
Okay.
Let me ask you,
Sure.
we want to give you some time to close.
Sure.
And that's your option. I did want to ask, course, you're running against the Lieutenant Governor now, but you supported him against Ted Cruz. Can you rationalize that?
Sure, as did Jerry Patterson, as did Todd Staples. They like to point out that for some reason I'm the only one. Every candidate did. Look, I've always said from day one, I think it's disingenuous to go back and say, gosh, you know what? I really made a mistake. Because you own up to it. You know, if you're going to do something, just own up to it. Whether it was a mistake or not, you own up to it. I didn't know a lot about Ted Cruz. Didn't know, like a lot of people. But I thought he deserved a chance to see if he could make the runoff. So what is missed in this discussion, and I'm not making an excuse here, but what is missed, it's never discussed, is that no senator, to my knowledge, and neither did Jerry or Todd, to my knowledge, I could be wrong, no one got involved in round one. If Dewhurst couldn't get 50% in round one, then shame on him, because he was the incumbent with all the money and the name ID. And so everyone basically stood back and said, let's give everybody a free shot. I don't know anyone that was out there campaigning or endorsing for Dewhurst. When we got to round two, again, to my knowledge, everybody stayed out of the fray. The very end, we got down to the last couple of days. It was clear, two things were clear. I'm just going to be honest with you. It was very clear Ted was going to win. It was very clear that David was going to be lieutenant governor. And he called all the senators, asked for support.